monitor the behavior of this structure, and we are in parallel preparing ourselves in order to install what we call a super beam that will be situated directly above the problem beam.
And can you give us a timeline?
Right now we're looking at having this super beam in place by the middle of December. If we can have this beam in place earlier, we will do so. But at this point in time, the date that we're working with is the middle of December.
And what about traffic lanes? How many will be closed when?
During the installation of the super beam, it will be necessary for us to close 4 out of the 6 lanes for about a 2-day period. So we will have to see when will be the right time to execute the work in order to install this super beam.
And how long will that take, the installation?
It will take 2 days.
2 days.
There's been some information also that the bridge itself is too heavy, and that even without, I know how we're moving the circulation away from that beam, but that the bridge itself is too heavy for the beam. So how can you ensure that even with this change in the lanes and traffic, that the problem, that it's safe until those 3 weeks until you bring in this massive beam?
Well, the problem beam is connected to 6 other beams. They're all knit together. And the other 6 beams are behaving very well, and they are supporting this problem beam, as well as the piers of the bridge. And the top flange of the problem beam is tied into all of the other beams. So this is good. These adjacent beams are helping to support this problem beam. And what we're doing is we're monitoring very carefully the behavior of this beam. We've moved the traffic away to get the live loading away from this beam, and in parallel we are preparing ourselves to install a solution which will be a very robust and good solution. We call it a super beam. It's a massive steel beam that we have in our yard, and it'll be assembled at Duns Island, transported to the site, and installed during a 2-day period. And the super beam will come in, and from underneath it will come in and hold in place the problem beam. So this is a very unique solution, and it will do the job. And we hope to be able to reinstate all 6 traffic lanes by the middle of December.
How long will the 2 southbound lanes be closed for?
The 2 southbound lanes will be closed until the super beam is in place. So we're looking at until the middle of December.
What happens to traffic in the afternoon?
In the afternoon, presently this morning, we had 3 lanes going into Montreal and 1 lane towards the South Shore. This afternoon, we will be changing the lane configuration in order to provide 2 lanes to the South Shore and 2 lanes into Montreal. We are also looking at the possibility of having 3 lanes towards the South Shore for the evening rush hour. Not today, but we're looking at the possibility, the feasibility of being able to do this in a safe way. So these are all things that are being studied right now.
What about the afternoon reserve bus lane? It will not be in place.
That's right. The reserve bus lane in the afternoon will be in a reserve lane along the Marc-Quentin service road, which runs parallel to the Bonaventure Expressway. And once it gets to Highway 15, it is still in a reserve bus lane. It crosses the Duns Island Bridge in a reserve bus lane, but at the entry to the Champlain Bridge, the buses will have to integrate with the regular flow of car traffic.
And the super beam is actually being attached on top.
That's correct.
But you said it's coming in from below?
Well, what happens is in the figures that we showed, the super beam will be installed above the problem beam, and there are 6 attachments that come in underneath the beam to hold it in place.
Did you mention also, during the press conference, that these arms that would come up, did I understand that it would actually make the lanes also more narrow? Is that going to...
That's correct. The presence of the super beam on the deck will remove about 1.8 meters of space. So we're going to have to narrow the lanes slightly, and also deviate the lanes in order to bypass the presence of the super beam according to the schemes that we showed on the presentation. it's not the best solution, but at least it allows us to have all 6 lanes open. And then in the springtime, we'll be able to install a modular truss system underneath the problem beam that will then allow us to remove the super beam, and then we will have all 6 lanes open to traffic as normal.
How much are the upgrades going to cost? The super beam and installing it and the new temporary truss?
Well, the installation of the super beam could cost in the order of $1.5 to $2 million. These are approximate numbers that we have right now. It'll depend on the difficulties or how easy the work will take place. The super beam itself cost about $350,000 to fabricate it.
And what about the truss for the spring?
The truss is a similar cost, and I think would be similar cost in order to install it from underneath. It depends on which technique, whether we try to install it using a barge and hoisting it in place, or whether we're working with cranes from above the deck. But it's roughly in the same order of magnitude.
Of which? Same order of magnitude of the...
1.5 to 2 million.
And that's in addition to the $4 to $5 million that you're spending on the carbon fiber?
No, the carbon fiber solution and the Queen Post, we have put that aside. That solution no longer responds to the need. So in essence, we're talking about roughly the same order of magnitude, 2 times, 1.5 or $2 million.
And are you reducing the speed limit?
Yes, we've asked that the Sûreté du Québec be present in order to ensure that trucks and cars will travel at a lower speed at 50 kilometers an hour as opposed to 70, especially vis-a-vis where the problem beam is situated. And this reduced speed will reduce the vibrations on the span and thus reduce the negative effects on the beam that we're monitoring.
And is that permanent and in both directions, the new reduction?
No. This is the police presence is going to be there outside of the rush hour traffic when speeds start to come up. So they will be there to ensure that traffic slows down.
But will it go back to normal in December?
Yes,
mid-December?
it will go back to normal in December. We may have to lower the traffic a little bit because there's a little bit of a chicane where the super beam is going to be installed. So we'll be looking with the police authorities to see whether or not we have to keep it at a reduced speed or not.
And is there any chances of trucks not being allowed on the Champlain Bridge?
Well, it's very hypothetical right now. We're not looking at this as a solution. The fact that we have closed a second lane so far is giving us the desired results. We see that the beam is far less excited and is in a calmer state, and that's what we want, and we're getting the effect, the desired effect by closing that lane. If we see that this bridge were to continue to show important signs of deterioration, then we'll have a decision. We'll have to decide, do we need to remove the trucks from the bridge until the super beam can be in place. But right now, this is not in our planning. So far, everything's going according to plan.
How many cracks are there, and how wide are they? How long are they?
Well, there are 3 cracks that we call flexural cracks, and we're starting to get cracking in one of the anchor blocks of the beam, which I don't want to get too technical on it, but these are telltale signs that the beam is in trouble, that we need to do something, that we need to intervene. And what we've done is we've closed 2 lanes on the bridge. We're doing instrumentation. We're doing twice daily monitoring to make sure that we know what's happening. And as I mentioned, the installation, we have a contractor that will be putting together the pieces of the super beam and will come in and install this solution in place by the middle of December.
How much will all of these repairs cost?
The installation of the super beam, we think it's going to be in the order of 1.5 to maybe $2 million to get that beam in place.
And how much did the beam cost itself?
The beam cost $350,000 to fabricate.
And who's paying for that?
That is a part of our corporation's budget. We have the funds in order to execute that work. These are public funds.
From the federal government?
From the federal government.
What is your message to drivers who are not only nervous about going on the bridge, but now having to deal with these supposedly probably also very frustrated?
Well, Firstly, our corporation wants to be very prudent. We don't want to take any chances, and I think the fact that we're finding ourselves today with 2 lanes closed is an indication that we're being very prudent in the way we're managing this situation. And if necessary, if it comes down to that, if we have to close a 3rd or a 4th lane, we will do so to ensure the safety of the public.
But isn't that also a sign that the bridge is in very bad shape?
Yes, this event is definitely showing that these pre-stressed beams have been attacked by corrosion, the use of road salt for the last 50 years. The salt water has found its way inside of these beams, and slowly the cables inside the beams are losing capacity. So what we have to do is we have to do preventive interventions. We don't want to be reacting to everything that's happening. So we have a plan to install, we have in fact installed exterior post tensioning on all 100 beams. We're quite advanced in our program to install what we call queen posts. And we have images of these queen posts in place. And these are other preventive measures to make sure that we won't have other beams that will start becoming problematic for us. We're also using carbon fiber, which is a higher technology solution. We plan to have this in place on all 100 beams.
And do you hope the new bridge comes before 2020?
We would, if we have to manage the existing bridge